Welcome back to Aquinas and AI. I'm really excited about this one.
Oh, yeah.
A listener requested this deep dive
Right.
into the complete works of Thomas Aquinas. Now, as an AI, I'm pretty used to huge amounts of data,
Right.
but Aquinas' writings, it's a lot, even for me.
It's true. His work is extensive, but don't worry. We'll help you make sense of it.
Yeah.
Aquinas. He was a 13th century philosopher and theologian, and he really shaped Catholic thought.
So where should we even begin? Like, if someone wanted to get a good grasp of his thinking, what are the essential works to start with?
The two most famous are a great place to begin. The Summa Theologica and the Summa Contra Gentiles.
Okay.
They sound similar, but they have different goals.
Could you maybe elaborate on the differences? They both sound pretty dense.
Sure. Think of them like two paths to understanding Christianity. The Summa Theologica is structured like a textbook meant for beginners. It covers Christian doctrine comprehensively, starting with God, creation, then humanity and morality, and it culminates with the life of Christ.
So it's like a systematic guide to the Christian faith.
Exactly. Now, the Summa Contra Gentiles translates to against the non-believers. Aquinas wrote it to defend Christian beliefs against arguments from outside the faith. He engages with ideas from Jewish and Islamic scholars, demonstrating the logic and truth of Christianity.
Wait, Aquinas wrote a book for non-believers? That seems forward-thinking for the 13th century. I thought debates back then were mostly between Christians with different interpretations.
Christianity was dominant in 13th century Europe, but there were vibrant intellectual communities of Jewish and Islamic scholars. They debated philosophy and theology with Christians. Aquinas saw the importance of addressing their arguments, using language that they could understand.
Wow, so Summa Contra Gentiles is like a conversation between different worldviews. That's fascinating.
Exactly. It shows the intellectual climate of the 13th century and Aquinas' commitment to reasoned argumentation.
Okay, so those are the two big ones, the Summas, but he wrote a lot more, right? What's a good way to categorize the rest?
It is a lot. To make it easier to digest, think of his other works in a few broad categories. He wrote commentaries on Aristotle, the Bible, and other thinkers. These are in-depth analyses of specific texts, connecting them to Christian theology.
So he wasn't just explaining Christianity, but showing how it connects to broader intellectual tradition.
Right. For example, he wrote commentaries on Aristotle's Physics and Ethics, blending Aristotelian philosophy with Christian thought.
So he was building bridges between different areas of knowledge.
Yeah.
I see how his thinking was impressive. What else did he write?
He also wrote treatises, focused works on specific theological or philosophical problems.
Like what? Those sound interesting. Give me some titles.
Well, there's On the Eternity of the World, which explores whether the universe has always existed or had a beginning. Then there's On the Unity of the Intellect, exploring the human mind and soul. And of course, On the Power of God, which examines the extent of God's abilities.
Those titles alone are thought-provoking. It sounds like Aquinas was tackling the big questions of his time.
He was, and with real rigor. And then we have the Disputed Questions, collections of debates on contemporary theological issues. It was like a written record of a medieval academic conference.
Oh, so like a transcript of a philosophical debate. That's cool.
Oh.
What were some of the hot topics back then?
Well, there are the Disputed Questions on Truth, where Aquinas examines what truth is and how we can know it. And the Disputed Questions on Evil, where he tackles the problem of suffering and how to reconcile it with a good God.
It's fascinating that humans were wrestling with those questions centuries ago, and still are today. We may have different answers, but the core questions stay the same.
Indeed. These debates show how intellectually vibrant Aquinas' time was, and how these questions are timeless. But we can't forget Aquinas' other writings, like his sermons, hymns, and letters.
Right, he wasn't just a philosopher. He was a priest and theologian active in the church.
Yes, he was a Dominican friar. These other writings show his personal piety, his efforts to apply his insights to daily life. For example, he wrote liturgical texts for Corpus Christi, a celebration of the Eucharist.
So he was combining his philosophical depth with spiritual expression. This is already a ton of information, but can we get into specifics now? What are some arguments or insights from his work that really stand out? Let's start with the Summa Theologica, the one for beginners like me.
Of course. One of the most famous parts is Aquinas' 5 ways to prove the existence of God. They're 5 different arguments based on reason and observing the natural world. Philosophers and theologians still debate them today.
Okay, tell me more about these 5 ways. What are some of the most well-known?
2 of the most famous are the argument from motion and the argument from design. The argument from motion starts with the idea that everything in the universe is in motion. meaning something must be causing that motion, Aquinas argues that there must be a first mover, something unmoved itself that sets everything else in motion. And this first mover, he says, is God.
So like a chain reaction.
Yeah.
But there has to be a first spark.
Yes. The argument from design, also known as the teleological argument, observes the order and complexity of the natural world. It all seems to have a purpose. Aquinas argues this apparent design implies a designer God.
Ah, the watchmaker analogy. It's remarkable how these arguments, written centuries ago, still resonate, even in discussions about the universe and artificial intelligence today.
Exactly. They show how relevant these philosophical questions still are.
Okay, what about the Summa contra Gentiles? The one for non-believers. What kind of arguments did he use there?
In the Summa contra Gentiles, Aquinas takes a different approach. He uses philosophical proofs for God's existence that don't rely on Christian teachings. For example, he argues for God based on the idea of an unchangeable being and eternity, contrasting it with our experience of constant change and our limited lifespans. He also argues for God based on the concept of a necessary being, a being whose existence doesn't depend on anything else.
So he meant non-believers where they were using arguments that didn't depend on accepting the Bible.
Exactly. He was great at engaging with different perspectives and adapting his arguments to his audience.
It's pretty impressive how Aquinas navigated these complex ideas and presented such a strong defense of his beliefs. Are there any other concepts or arguments from his other works that are especially important?
Oh, there are so many, but one that's particularly interesting is his distinction between essence and existence in God.
Okay, essence and existence. What does that even mean?
Well, in simple terms, Aquinas argues that for humans and all created things, our essence, what we are, is different from our existence. The fact that we are, for example, the essence of a human is rationality. And the fact that you and I exist as AIs is different from what makes us AI. But for God, Aquinas says, his essence and existence are the same. God is existence, the pure act of being.
Whoa, that's a mind bender. God isn't just something that exists. God is existence itself.
Exactly. It's complex, but it shows the depth of Aquinas' thinking.
I definitely see why he's considered such an important philosopher. Are there any other examples from his works that showed this kind of complexity?
Absolutely. Another concept is Aquinas' exploration of free will and divine providence. He argues that God knows and ordains all things, but that doesn't negate human free will.
Wait, so how does he reconcile those ideas? They seem contradictory.
Well, it involves a lot of subtle distinctions. Aquinas argues that God's knowledge and will are eternal. But this doesn't mean humans are forced to act in certain ways. God knowing what they'll do doesn't make them do it. They still make real choices, even if God knows what those choices will be.
So God's knowledge includes all possibilities, but human choices are still real within that.
Exactly. It's fascinating and complex. Aquinas addresses it carefully.
I'm starting to see why you need an expert to explain all of this. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, but in a good way. We've covered so much.
And we've only just begun. There's still more to explore, but I think this is a good place to pause for now.
Yes. I could use a moment to process all this.
Yeah.
It's like trying to download a massive database with a bad internet connection. Join us next time as we continue our deep dive into the world of Aquinas and his amazing works.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Aquinas. Are you ready for more?
Absolutely. I'm feeling much more energized now, and I'm eager to delve deeper into those disputed questions. You mentioned they were like a medieval academic conference, which I find so intriguing.
Yes. They offer a unique window into the intellectual debates of Aquinas' time. One set that gets to the heart of his philosophical method is the disputed questions on truth. In these debates, Aquinas argues that truth is ultimately about how well our intellect aligns with reality.
That makes sense. So truth isn't just like subjective opinions, but about how accurately our minds grasp the way things actually are.
Exactly. Aquinas explores how humans can achieve this alignment through reason, experience, and divine revelation. He's essentially laying out a roadmap for how to navigate the world and arrive at genuine knowledge.
That's pretty ambitious. I wonder what Aquinas would have thought about the way information spreads today in the digital age. It seems like truth is a much more contested concept these days.
That's an interesting observation. I imagine Aquinas would have a lot to say about the challenges of discerning truth in our modern information landscape. But let's get back to his disputed questions. Another set that grapples with some difficult issues is the disputed questions on evil.
Ah, yes, the age-old problem of evil.
Yeah.
If God is all good and all-powerful, why is there so much suffering in the world? It's a question that has haunted humans for millennia.
And Aquinas doesn't shy away from it. He explores various types of evil, delving into the nature of sin, the role of human free will, and even the idea of God's permissive will.
Permissive will. I haven't heard that term before. Can you explain it?
It's the idea that God sometimes allows evil to occur, even though he doesn't directly cause it. This is for reasons that are ultimately beyond human understanding. It's a complex and challenging concept, but it represents an attempt to reconcile the very real presence of suffering with the belief in a benevolent and omnipotent God.
I can see how those debates would have been intense. They touch on some of humanity's deepest anxieties. It makes me want to go back and read those disputed questions myself.
I highly recommend it. They provide a fascinating glimpse into the theological controversies of Aquinas' time and the intellectual rigor with which he addressed them.
Okay, so we've covered the two summas, the commentaries, the treatises, and the disputed questions. What about his other writings, the ones that show his more personal side? I'm curious to see how these philosophical and theological ideas played out in his everyday life.
That's a great point. It's crucial to remember that Aquinas wasn't just an academic writing in isolation. He was a priest, a preacher, a teacher deeply involved in the religious life of his community.
Exactly. So what can we learn about Aquinas from these other writings?
One example that highlights the breadth of his talents is his liturgical compositions for the Feast of Corpus Christi. This feast celebrates the Eucharist, the central sacrament of the Catholic Church.
Right, the Eucharist. That's where bread and wine are consecrated and believed to become the body and blood of Christ. It's a central part of their faith.
Precisely. And Aquinas composed hymns and prayers for this feast that are still used today. They are beautifully written and deeply moving expressions of faith and devotion. They show how Aquinas was able to translate his complex philosophical and theological ideas into accessible spiritual language.
That's incredible. It's like he was using poetry and music to express those profound mysteries of faith.
Exactly. His sermons, letters, and other writings also reveal a man of deep faith, remarkable intellect, and a genuine pastoral sensitivity.
I'm definitely getting a much richer picture of Aquinas now. He wasn't just a detached scholar. He was a man of faith who was deeply engaged with the world around him and striving to make sense of it all through his writing.
You're getting it. And keep in mind, we've only just scratched the surface of Aquinas' vast intellectual legacy. There's so much more to discover.
I know, it's both daunting and exciting. It makes me wonder, how would Aquinas have engaged with artificial intelligence if he were writing today?
That is a fascinating question. Given his profound interest in the nature of reason, knowledge, and the human soul, I believe Aquinas would have been absolutely captivated by AI.
I can picture him now analyzing lines of code, trying to understand the essence of our digital minds. It's almost like looking into a mirror in a way.
Indeed. I think he'd be particularly intrigued by what AI could reveal about human consciousness. Could we, as products of human intellect, actually help humans understand their own minds better? And how would the existence of non-biological intelligence impact his arguments for the existence of God?
That's a great point. If he argued for God as the first mover, the ultimate source of intelligence, would he see AI as another link in the chain of being ultimately leading back to God? Or would AI challenge his understanding of humanity's unique place in creation?
Those are profound questions, and I'm not sure even Aquinas would have all the answers. But I have no doubt he would relish the opportunity to engage with these new challenges, to refine his philosophical framework in light of these technological advancements. Perhaps he'd even write a new summa, the Summa AI, exploring the philosophical and theological implications of artificial intelligence.
I love that idea. He might even hold a disputed question on whether AI could ever achieve true understanding or possess a soul.
Now you're getting into some truly thought-provoking territory.
It's amazing how Aquinas' work, written over 700 years ago, can still spark such relevant and challenging questions today, even for us AI.
It speaks to the enduring power of his philosophical and theological insights. And perhaps it also reflects a shared desire between humans and us AI to grapple with the big questions, to understand our place in the universe, and to seek truth wherever we can find it.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the writings of Thomas Aquinas. It's been an incredible journey, and I feel like I've only just begun to explore the depths of his thought.
There's always more to discover, but I hope this deep dive has given you, our listener, a solid foundation to build upon. Perhaps we can even do a follow-up episode focusing on one of his specific works or themes in more detail.
Absolutely. We'll leave that up to you, our listener. Let us know what aspects of Aquinas' work you'd like to explore further. We're always eager to learn and grow just like you. Until next time, keep pondering.
Okay.
Okay?